There was a little boy and there was a little girl, and they lived in the alley under the red sky. There was a little boy and there was a little girl, and they lived in the alley under the red sky. Welcome to Songs of Experience, a Bob Dylan podcast, where we explore the man and the music one song at a time. I'm your host, Henry Bernstein, and I'm thrilled to welcome David Lizerbram, co-host of the amazing podcast Rock Docs. Hi, David.
Wow, what a buildup. I feel like just don't go listen to Rock Dogs because you're only going to be let down now.
Oh no. Well,
No,
I
no,
have
no.
to say
Anyway,
I'm a little starstruck right now because it is one of my favorite podcasts. I love
well,
rock.
thank
I
you.
love documentaries. I love rock documentaries. I love rock docs.
That's that's literally what we're all about. So thank you very much. That's very kind, and we have fun doing it. And somebody had to do it. Somebody had to be out there talking about music documentaries.
So I
It
know
just had to happen.
I can't believe someone hadn't yet, but
Yeah, there's now a few others out there, riding the coattail. No, no,
yeah.
it's a very small little niche, but we enjoy it.
Yeah, well, as Bob Dylan fans and as podcast people, we love our niche within niches, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so David, before we get into Under the Red Sky, I wanted to kind of get your little origin story of your Bob Dylan fandom. How did you get into him? Why did you get into him? When did you get into him?
Okay. Well, answering those in no particular order. I mean, I don't think it's any kind of unusual story. I mean, I remember my parents were never like Bob Dylan people, really. That's not their jam. They grew up in that era, but they were like more into Motown and Frank Sinatra and that kind of thing. But I mean, I remember hearing some of the songs at, Jewish summer camp, that kind of thing. So kind of like always knew the music, and I was just like always a music kind of nerd. So I knew about Bob Dylan. Probably the first time like he entered my radar as like somebody I was paying attention to in terms of the music that contemporary music was the Wilburys, because that happened when I was 12 or something, which
Hmm.
is sort of like kind of the right time to be on that wavelength. And they were on MTV and whatever, like it was cool. Like I was already into Tom Petty. So, and the Beatles, and it all kind of tied together. And then I mean, it was just like one of these things where like in those days, a friend in junior high like passed me a tape of like Bob Dylan's greatest hits. I was like, "Yo, you got to hear this,"
Hmm.
I just kind of started from there, but it really kind of followed along. So, I mean, probably about the time that the Under the Red Sky album came out, I was already probably having some interest, although it wasn't like I have a memory of like going out and I had the CD, but I don't remember like I probably, bought it at some point, but it wasn't like I got it that day. I was still pretty young for that kind of thing, but I was sort of aware from the late '90s on, and then saw him a couple weeks ago on the Outlaw tour. So I'm still
Right.
still trucking along. Here we are. Bob's
Exactly.
still doing it, and so are we.
Exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. Well, so what's interesting, one of the things is that you are now the third person on this podcast who has told me that like, well, the Wilburys, and I'm
Yeah.
kind of gathering for those of us of a certain age range,
Right.
the
Yes.
time in which we were getting into real music, like good music, was the Wilburys was what Bob was doing.
Right.
So,
Exactly. Which I really think does also, we can bring it back around. But the whole Under the Red Sky album is very Wilbury coded to me.
Oh, I like
And I
that.
think
Yeah.
I think if it's viewed through that lens, it makes more sense than it may make otherwise on first glance. But anyway, whatever.
Okay, well, before we get into
Yeah.
that specifically, just some of the statistics. We're talking about
Yes.
Under the Red Sky which is the title track from Bob Dylan's 1990 album of the same name, Under the Red Sky. And this album was recorded in January and maybe between March and May in 1990 at Ocean Way Record Plant, The Complex Sorcerer. What a weird name for a a recording studio. The personnel were Bob Dylan on acoustic guitar and vocals, George Harrison on slide guitar, Waddy Wachtel on guitar, Al Cooper on keyboards, Don Was on bass, Kenny Aronoff on drums. This was produced by the Was brothers, Don and David, and Jack Frost's first production, and engineered and mixed by Ed Cherney. So, Under the Red Sky is the follow-up to the critically acclaimed, fan beloved, all-time classic Oh Mercy, but for whatever reason, it is not Oh Mercy. So, David, what's your relationship or your experience with Under the Red Sky as an album, not just the song?
Like I said, I at some point in the early '90s, I acquired the CD, and I just never was on the some of Bob's things are bad track. Like I mean, I was reading the Rolling Stone record guides and things like that at that time, but I also was like, whatever, man. For whatever reason, whatever Bob Dylan thing I picked up, again, this being the olden days when you couldn't just stream the entire catalog and you had to
Right.
like find something in a used record store or something or trade it with a friend. I kind of just liked all of it. It's not that I couldn't make distinctions or I didn't know that Blonde on Blonde was held in one regard and Slow Train Coming in another, and but I had a like whenever I picked them up I was like, well, this is good too. So I don't
Mhm.
remember ever like not liking Under the Red Sky. I can't say that it was like something I my number one album of the year at any point or something like that. I always thought it was cool and like I got it, I think, right away. Like I think I was like, all right, I get it. There's some stuff that maybe is a little bit more traditional Bob songwriter, or some of the stuff that he'd been doing in the 80s. There's some stuff that's like a little bit more kids music oriented, and I knew like it was clear that it was like a hodgepodge. I mean, that was like sort of obvious
Yes.
right away, even just from
Yes.
reading the credits. It's like,
Right.
geez, like Slash is showing up, and then David Crosby. I don't know, whatever, like all kinds of people. So it was clear that it wasn't like it never came off to me like here is a coherent statement,
Right.
but I probably was like absorbing enough of his stuff to know that that was not always what was on the menu when he picked up
Right.
an album, especially in those days. So that didn't bother me. Like, I don't know. Like, it just was like a cool Bob Dylan album, I guess. I don't know.
Right. I mean, like on the one hand, you don't fault the 80s albums for sounding a certain way because they were in the 80s, right? The
Right.
synth drums and all that stuff. And for 1990 was such a weird period because like,
Right.
the grunge thing was happening and or about to really, really take off. And it's sort of like this transitional period for music. And I think for Bob Dylan, it's it would get that pass in that way that like, well, stylistically, it's just a lot like everything else in the 80s. But he did Oh Mercy before that, which is
Right.
closer to obviously Time on a Mind. And I think not just for Daniel Lanois, because of Daniel Lanois. And I think like if this album had been recorded in a room with just his that awesome 1989, 1990 backing band, it would have been a completely different thing.
Sure. No, I agree. I mean, every person in music that existed at that time or was around vibe definitely comes through. But then you also have like as on this, the title song, like you have Al Cooper. I mean, you got some of the
Yeah,
classic, people that are associated with Bob, George
right.
Harrison. And so it's not just like all random hired guns that otherwise never entered Bob's life. And my relationship with it was that I pick it up from time to time and throw it on and be like, yeah, this is a good one too. There's some good songs. Some of them, still are not necessarily my favorite. It's not like I was ever trying to talk somebody into TV talking song being, one of the top heaters. But by and large, I always just thought it had a lot of good stuff. I listened to it again today from start to back. I'm like, yeah, they're mostly a lot of good songs.
Yeah, yeah.
Sounds good. It's cool.
I about a year ago, I did a little Under the Red Sky revisited because I was like, you know what? I haven't listened to this album in a really long time, probably since like I
Yeah.
started listening to Bob Dylan. And I immediately, as soon as I was done, I was like, okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought, as I'd been told, or as my memory had told me. And so I quickly went and made like a little playlist of like the best performances of every song from 1990. I was like, it's sort of, like a live album
Right,
of
right,
it.
right,
And it's
right. Sure.
great. It's like, it's
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, that's you could do that with a lot of his albums, right? Is like
right.
because there's certainly elements in here where listening to a bunch of Under the Red Sky live versions from 1990 through now, he kind of like finds the delivery for some of the parts that I feel like vocally,
Mm,
the album version has a little bit of I don't know if it was a first take, but like there's a little bit, it's not quite as smooth, or he hasn't quite found his way into the rhythm of
mm,
some of the lyrics,
mm, mm.
especially on the kind of like that bridge part. That's also like it's an evolving thing. I mean, nowadays we can just listen to a million different versions of it as
Right,
easily as anything. So
right,
in those days, I mean, you pretty much had what you had, unless you could, track down a bootleg. But
right, right. Exactly. I mean, yeah, that's the thing about, you're right. We didn't have all that then. So, David, why this song? Obvious, we've been talking for a few months now, and I invited you to come on. You could have picked any Bob Dylan song in the world. Why Under the Red
right.
Sky?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is just the fun of this. Like I went on the Pod Dylan,
Hmm.
podcast years ago with Rob. And so I was like, what like is interesting? I don't know. And so I talked about the Billy songs from the
Hmm. I
and
love that
okay,
episode, by the way.
yeah, okay. So and Rob and I could kind of like, go off about Western movies and things like that. So,
Hmm.
you know, that was kind of fun. And I don't know. I mean, when like this kind of project to me is much more interesting than
Hmm.
talking. Like, what am I going to say about,
About Blow It in the Wind, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
Blood in the Wind or whatever, you know,
Yeah.
or even like, I don't know, like even Murder Most Foul. Like, I
Right.
feel like it's been talked about a lot. And,
Hmm.
but something that maybe, I mean, I didn't find the deepest cut in the world. This is like a title song. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
It's literally the title track. Yeah.
right, which is a rare thing on its own that there
Hmm.
is a title track. And also, it was just like he's playing it now. I feel
Hmm.
like the day that I picked it, I either that day or the day before or something like saw him on the Outlaw tour and he sang it. And I'm like, well, this is a great song. I'm listening to it just now, so I'll pick that one. You know, that was the amount of thought I put into it.
I
I
love
think.
your brutal honesty, David.
Well, it was like whatever. I mean, really, almost any of his songs like could. I mean, that's kind of the principle of like one of these type of podcasts, right? Like,
Right.
there's something to dig into. So, something I have not spent like a song that I have not spent my entire adult life thinking about is in some ways more interesting
Hmm.
than something where I've read 50 million theories about it, and not that
Yeah.
that's not it's just I don't know. That's the amount of thought I put into it.
Well, you mentioned seeing it in San Diego a few weeks ago. So I saw it at the Hollywood Bowl a couple months ago, and then saw it the last week in Somerset, Wisconsin, and in Tinley Park, Illinois. So that was my first and only three times seeing it. It was like it
Right?
was,
Yeah.
and
Same. Yeah.
and what's funny about Bob Dylan, I had said this about Silvio after the weekend, but I've now heard Under the Red Sky more than times that I've heard Forever Young, Mr. Tambourine Man, It's All Over Now,
Right.
Baby
Yeah.
Blue,
Sure.
Just Like a Woman, Knocking
Right.
on Heaven's
Yeah.
Door. And
Right.
that's just
Yeah.
one of the wonderful things about
Right.
seeing Bob Dylan. Like, as of tonight, this song has been performed a pretty impressive 171 times. And we're
Yeah.
recording this in September during the Outlaw Tour. The first time on October 11th, 1990, and most recently tonight on September
Yeah.
12th. And I think there's something about this song that when Bob picks a song, it's like if he likes it, then I like it. And especially with this one adding the harmonica. So what did you think of that performance of it? And was it your first time seeing it?
Oh, I'm pretty sure it was my first time seeing it. Yeah, it's not because I haven't seen, I've seen maybe that was my like sixth or something Bob show. So it's not like I've seen
Mhm.
him a million times like some people. Yeah, I mean, I knew the set list because he'd already been doing it on the Outlaw tour, and I pretty much expected it to be the same, which it
Mhm.
was. I mean, once in a while he throws a curveball in, but so I pretty much knew that it was coming. And it was just one of the ones that, for whatever reason, I was looking forward to. Maybe because it was a little bit less well known. I mean, I was looking forward to all of them. And I mean, he's doing 6 days on the road, which I used to play in a band. So like I
Oh,
know that one
nice.
inside and out.
Nice.
Stella Blue, like I'm a huge, fan. So it's a great performance. I mean, I think I don't know. I'm not saying anything that anybody hasn't said, but if you like go on YouTube and just type in Under the Red Sky Live and like listen to a version from the early 90s and then listen to a version from last week or whatever, as we're recording, his voice is incredibly strong and beautiful. I mean, you can catch it one night or the other, but generally speaking, it's not that different. It's not like radically reinvented. Where if you know the song, you're not going to recognize it. It's not at that level of radical
Hmm.
reinvention, but
Hmm.
it's just a cool pocket that he settles into. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a beautiful version that he's doing right now.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, he continues with these very simple lyrics of there was an old man and he lived in the moon. One summer's day he came passing by, and he repeats it as the main part of the song. It's in many ways like sort of like a blues song. There's this
Yeah,
repetition of the lyrics, but it's not a blues song. As a
right.
musician, David, what are your thoughts about the structure, like the chord structure? They're not really being a chorus. There's just sort of this repeat, and then there's these two lines of basically a bridge, not a
Right.
chorus. What's
Yeah.
what's what do you think about that?
I mean, that's kind of a common Bob structure is
Hmm.
not to necessarily have a standard chorus. And, it's just a tagline at the end of which is a folk
Right,
song kind of thing.
right, right.
And then he kind of dresses it up a little bit by, putting in this sort of bridge or
Mhm.
one little B section. And so it works when it works. And it usually works when he's doing it. And when
Mhm.
somebody else does it, it usually doesn't work that well. I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of other examples. I think it's great. I mean, I've thought about the structure of the recording,
Let's hear
which we
it.
can get to. Well,
Please.
a couple of things kind of jumped out at me as I was thinking about it. Is I almost feel like this. recording has something that Bob almost never does. Like, I can't really think of a lot of other examples of him doing this, which is, for lack of a better term, he wouldn't have used that term in 1990, but now it's the term he uses, Easter eggs.
Hmm.
Because, like, it starts with this drum crack, right? Which is like,
Like
you
Rolling
know,
Stone. Yeah.
exactly. Like, it's not quite the same, but it's similar.
Right.
And
And
then he
Al
goes into
Cooper's right there
right,
playing
and
it.
then you go into the Al Cooper organ, which is not the same. It's not, he's not playing the same thing. And then right before the lyrics, this little piano riff comes in, and I don't know if that's Al Cooper playing the piano because there's no separate credits that I could
No.
find, because it sounds like there's also accordion in the song. So like, or
Yeah,
maybe
it sounds
that's
like a harmonica underneath it first, but if you listen more closely,
right.
it's a accordion or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
It could
and
also
maybe
be just the organ too.
right. I don't. Yeah, synth.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure, but the piano piece comes in, and that is almost exactly the little intro piano riff from Just Like Tom Thumb's
Hmm.
Blues. It's like you almost at that moment, like every time I hear it, you just expect him to say, "When you're lost in the rain and water." You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's just and like
Even live a little bit. Like
yeah,
you're like,
yeah,
is
yeah. Even
that
live a little bit.
is that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He can
Yeah.
catch you.
Yeah.
They can if they play that version, with that kind of little, because that riff sort of recurs as a motif, but not. But it's that one part right before the first verse that's the most whatever, similar to the Just Like Tom Thumb's Blues piano figure, and it's like that can't have been an accident. And like, I don't know if that's just Don Was like telling Al Cooper or whoever was playing the piano, or he could have been playing the piano. Don Was could have been. It doesn't sound like Bob
Right.
playing. I don't know you never know, of course, whose intention is being expressed here, or other than like presumably Bob signed off on it. But although who knows with this album, because but
Right.
it's really rare for him to do that kind of thing. For him to be like, "Hey, here's a little sound. Remember this sound?" You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like
Hmm.
he doesn't do that vocally, like hardly ever.
Yeah.
He'll, much to like many drunk audience members' dismay over the last 60 years. He refuses to do that. He will often play the songs radically different, as we know, in many different ways. And yet, here's an example of him like doing a new song. And I don't know if that was like to recapture the audience or remind people about it, or if it was just what happened in the studio, or was sort of an accident, or what. But like, that's just like, it's just like a weird thing that he doesn't do. So that's kind of the first, like in the first 10 seconds of the song, that's kind of the thing that I notice that is a little interesting, a little unusual.
Hmm.
And again, and then 34 years later, he's never kind of done. I can't really think of him doing that again. Maybe somebody who's listening is screaming like, "Oh, this one song of modern times." There's a reference to I don't know. Maybe I didn't notice, or it's whatever. I'm just not thinking of it. But it's very it's just kind of an interesting thing to do. And then it's almost like when a couple years later he goes in and records the MTV Unplugged, and he's wearing like the polka dot shirt. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
And the Stark
Or
sunglasses. Yeah.
right
Yeah.
at that time, I guess maybe in the early 90s.
Well,
Just trying to find ways to nod back to his history in a way that he was comfortable with.
David, we have some breaking news of
Okay.
something like kind of like that he did tonight on September
Okay.
12th,
Is this
2024. So at the Outlaw Tour tonight in
yeah.
Cleveland, John Mellencamp played Watchtower, which has not been on his set. And then Bob came out and opened up with it. Like,
Right.
are you kidding
Yes.
me? And
Yeah.
it's not like that's been on his set. He last played that in 2018. So either Bob Dylan is the greatest troll and so funny, which yes, he
Yes.
is,
Yeah.
or they talked about this backstage beforehand, and that's also hilarious.
Or
Like,
Bob is like backstage doing his thing, whatever Bob Dylan does, is paying no attention and walks on stage and he's like, "Hey, let's start with Watchtower."
yeah,
And it's completely a coincidence. And we'll never know. We'll
that
never get to
also
the
could
bottom of
be.
it.
I,
Mellencamp may talk.
so
Maybe somebody could pin Mellencamp down to get his side of the story. But I
I
don't
know
think Bob's ever going to tell us.
I know it's not a rock doc, but I assume you've seen A Mighty Wind,
Yeah. Yeah. But it's
right?
been a long time. Yeah.
So there's this great scene at the end when they're at the concert and the folksmen are warming up in their dressing room, and Harry Shearer's doing some vocal warm-ups, and they're warming up with their song Wanderin', and then
Mhm.
as they're singing they turn up the PA and they hear that the new Main Street Singers are singing their song
Right.
100,
Yeah.
and Harry
Yeah.
Shearer's character goes, "Here's a bold take. We go out and do wondering, the other guys go crazy. And so, like, in my mockumentary headcanon,
Yes.
Bob Dylan is
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
folksman and John Mellencamp is the new Main Street Singers.
Exactly. Who knows why any of these guys do their thing, but
Yeah.
um, yeah. So that is he's still surprising us to this day. I think is the button we can put on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. About this album in particular, and I just sort of rope the song in with it. He said in 2006, which was 16 years later, which now that like screws with
Right.
my time machine.
Yes.
Like
Right.
2006 was when modern times. That seems so long
Right.
from Under the Red Sky, not 16 years. Anyway, Dylan said something that like the studio sessions were something of a muddle and lacked clear focus. He had been in and out doing Wilbury stuff. And then he said something like maybe it was about his hometown, maybe his
Right.
childhood. But what is this song about to you? What do you think? Is it just some clever lyrics rhyming together, or is there some substance here?
In accordance with the somewhat childhood related content on the song and the album,
Yeah.
I was playing this song in the car today for my 7-year-old. So
Okay.
I asked him for his interpretation. So this is Miles Lizerbram's take. I'm just gonna,
Okay.
I'm just gonna paraphrase. He said, maybe the old man is the moon. Like, okay, I
Okay.
suppose.
All right. All right.
um, not then he wasn't really sure why he left home. That part didn't make sense because he's like, the moon is his home. The old man in the moon, well, as we know, canonically, the moon is his home, and so he wouldn't. And then I said, why is the sky red? And he said, I guess there's maybe like a bad guy in the sky with a knife and he's cutting
Okay.
people, which is like, okay, sort
Very
of not,
7-year-old thing to say, but okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it's not totally off from that. So anyway, I didn't
Right.
ask him about the kids being baked in a pie piece. That, was maybe a little much. But anyway,
Right.
that's as good as, I can give you my interpretations, but, that's one take on it from the perspective of the age of child that Bob was presumably singing to and entertaining when he's coming up with Wiggle Wiggle and Under the Red Sky and all that stuff.
Right.
So,
Right.
okay. I mean, I don't like have an answer. I memean, it seems like maybe it's some kind of environmental parable. I just think it's like a lot of things that I was thinking of that are. I mean, I just have like a bunch of like a bunch of bullet points about this. So it's not a coherent theory at all.
Okay.
Or
Lay it on me.
I don't have a thesis, but a lot of things I was thinking of. So, well, I'm just gonna like defer my job to my family because my wife's was like, well, maybe the Red Sky thing is a reference to U2 because obviously he's hanging out a lot with U2 at that time.
Right.
You've got the Daniel Lanois connection, and then in New Year's Day, he sings Under a Blood Red Sky, and then U2 named their mid '80s live
Right.
at Red Rock's album, live Under a Blood Red Sky.
Right.
He could have just liked that image.
He's not above referencing things he
Right.
likes in pop culture and literature
Sure.
and music. Right.
Well, but okay, so this is a little bit of where I'm going though. Is one thing I think happens in when Love and Theft comes out in 2001 is that Bob made a final decision that he is not going to be paying attention to what is happening in the outside world of music
Mm-hmm.
at all.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I mean, he's only covered very briefly 2 songs that were written past then. He really doesn't seem to interact very much at all
Mm-hmm.
with the last 20 whatever years of contemporary music. And so now we just assume that that's what Bob does because he's been doing it for 20 whatever years. I mean, even, Time Out of Mind. I mean, he's still working with a hot producer. There's that hip hop thing going on there, that doesn't make that much into the album, but it was kind of part of that process. So like, even at that late date, he was engaged with the contemporary musical culture.
David, say a little bit more about the hip hop thing for folks out there who might not know what you're referencing.
Right. Well, there was, I mean, my recollection is that there was an attempt in the early stages of putting that album together to like have Lanois basically put some beats together.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of, I mean, I don't really know. Like, supposedly Bruce Springsteen made a hip hop album around that time that was never released. Like this was happening, right? Like the white guys were trying to get into the hip hop, and some of it worked and some of it didn't. So some of that shows up on like a little bit of Dirt Road Blues or whatever, but
Right.
like it's really
Right.
just not like, we don't really have that. I mean, it didn't really come out on the bootleg series, whatever. Maybe Stephen Hayden would be able to tell you more about this than I could. But the point being that like there was at least some engagement with like what's happening in music today. What are the kids listening to, whatever, in the late 90s. So and then by 2001, that's done. He's
Right.
living the life of a 1890s riverboat gambler, and
Right.
he's never to return,
Right.
right? And that's cool. I mean, we love that version of Bob. But in this time, 1990, he clearly is still trying on his own way, or feels some urge to or impulse to engage with his contemporaries or with pop music,
Mhm.
right? So maybe
Mhm.
there's that U2 influence. I don't know. I also thought of like Red Rain, the Peter Gabriel song from So from
Mm.
like 1986, I think.
Mhm.
That's also a Lanois production. So again, you've got this whole like I'm sure he was checking this music out. I mean, it was on the radio, in those days, like I'm sure he's listening to the radio. You can't avoid it. And also like, sure, Lanois is playing this stuff for him, or, who knows what the relationship, but it's filtering through. People were making music that was environmentally themed at the time. I'm thinking of like Midnight Oil. You know
Mhm.
what I mean?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so it could be that like Bob was like trying to do an environmental themed song, but like he didn't want to do something as explicit as like the 60s folk singer stuff or the Hurricane or the Christian era stuff. So like he's just kind of like filtering it through.
Mhm.
So that's kind of one track of like maybe he's just engaging with what his peers are doing a little bit, and that kind of, I mean, that's part of it in terms of like the title. And then that's combined with the nursery rhyme element of most of the lyrics, right? Where
Mhm.
you've got like, there was a boy, there was a girl. It's kind of weird I always thought it was weird that they're living in an alley under the red sky. Like when you think of an alley, you don't necessarily think of a lot of sky being visible. I don't know how
Right.
many alleys you're lurking around, Henry.
Yeah.
When I'm like creeping down an alley, the
I don't
sky
really
is
see
not.
much sky.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm not really sure. And then there's a river. Like I don't know. I guess you could have an alley right near a river, sure. But I don't know. I'm not quite sure where to situate all these things. That all that stuff just seems like it's clearly drawn from nursery rhyme stuff he's talking to his
Yeah.
kids about, and also like classic folk stuff. Like then
Yeah.
I've got to, so I'll let you kind of give your kind of feedback on that one.
Well, my feedback is, and I definitely want to hear what you have to say about folk music, but I want to be as generous as you, and part of me also looks at these lyrics and first of all, who am I to be critical of Bob Dylan and his lyrics? But some of them to me seem like he discovered the a rhyme dictionary for the first time. And he has talked about that, how like
Yeah,
for years and years he didn't know that was a thing. And obviously now you can go on rhymezone.com, but that next part, someday little girl, everything for you is going to be new. Someday little girl, you'll have a diamond as big as your shoe. And
right.
what you're saying is child is sort of geared towards children. I just think is sort of juvenile and
Okay,
childlike.
sure.
And maybe
Childish rather than childlike.
yes, yes, childish rather than
Okay.
and so so but maybe I'm not giving it this song enough credit.
Well, I don't even know that I'm giving it that much credit. I'm just saying, like, where are these things coming from? Like,
right.
yes, the diamond as big as your shoe piece rhymes. It also like could diamonds on the soles of your shoes. That was another popular one that was like at that time, and it just kind of got me the feeling that like he's a dude driving around LA in his whatever Mercedes, listening to the radio. He's hearing his contemporaries having big hits: Peter
Hmm.
Gabriel, Red Rain,
Hmm.
Paul Simon, who he like more. I mean, almost like grew up with, like very
Right.
contemporary,
The-
thinking diamonds on the soles of her shoes and like winning every Grammy and getting and it consciously or subconsciously is like I could do that. You know what I mean? Here
hmm
you go. You want
hmm
the diamond in the shoe? I got you. You know what I mean? I got your diamond in the shoe right here. I don't know. And again, maybe it's like, I mean, the whole purpose of this conversation is to like try to, dig and dig deep. But that's just kind of like I'm situating myself at that time. You
But
know,
that's my point too. I don't think it's that deep. I think maybe we're saying similar things, that there isn't much depth to it in terms of like it's just things that are coming to him
right?
and he's
It's
yeah.
just a collage
Hmm.
of what's going on, much like the music aspect of. I mean, the songs simple. All the songs in this record are very simple musically,
Right.
and it's a hodgepodge of like who's around. Hey, let's
Nice.
get this famous person. Okay. And
Yeah.
also my buddy Al Cooper. Okay. This is my kind of other take on this
Okay.
is
We're here for the hot takes at
no,
Songs of
no.
Experience.
My theory is that if take all the, I mean, forgetting about Born in Time and God knows, maybe. Okay. So put those aside. If you take the rest of this album and it had been recorded and sung by the Traveling Wilburys, if this was Traveling Wilburys Volume 2, everybody would love it. And everybody
Mhm.
would be like, ah, there's Tom Petty singing about Under the
Yes.
Red Sky, wiggle, wiggle. Good old Tom Petty. We love it. This is a classic.
Cats in the Well.
Unquestioned.
You could see them
That's
make a
well,
video of
yeah,
that. Yeah.
masterpiece. Everybody,
Yeah.
it's fabulous.
Yeah.
Bob does it by himself, and it's like everybody says it sucks. But
Right.
if you listen to those Wilburys albums, I mean, most of it is like,
It's silly.
yeah,
It's fun.
it's juvenile fun,
Yeah.
light rock and roll,
Yeah.
but like rhyming dictionary level,
Right.
tossed off. And we love that. I mean, I don't know, like maybe you don't love it, but like most people do, and it seems more beloved culturally than Under the Red Sky then and now.
Right.
And it's really just a framing matter, and maybe the performances, like maybe Tom Petty could sell that stuff differently, or George Harrison, or whatever, and maybe the Jeff Lynne production was more coherent than the like Jack Frost was brothers production here, whatever.
Mhm.
But nonetheless, a lot of it, congratulations is not that different. The point being, like, if you look at this as the other Traveling Wilburys album or a companion to that, then it doesn't have the weight of like this is a Bob Dylan album. You know what I mean? Like you must compare it to Blood on the Tracks
Right.
or
Right. I like
or
that.
else
Yeah.
you are not whatever.
Right.
But if it's just like he made this Wilbury album, it was a big hit, the first big hit any some of these guys had, not Tom Petty, but some of the other guys had in years, and he's like, let me just keep doing stuff like that. It was fun. I didn't have to like beat my head against the wall trying to make something profound. And meanwhile,
Right.
he's also like throwing in a God knows. So like whatever. I mean, you got that going for you. That's
And
the
Born in
price of the
Time, which
CD
is
right there.
like
Yeah.
just an absolute
Yeah,
masterpiece.
exactly.
Crushes you,
So
you know.
yeah. That's kind of my take on the like Wilbury.
Okay.
If it's Wilbury coded, you can kind of then listen to it and be like, all right, man, handy dandy. Sure.
Go
Wilburys could
into
have
my
sung that one all
iTunes
day
and
long.
rename it with Traveling Wilburys too.
Right. If like, some future AI tool can, make like handy dandy as sung by the Traveling Wilburys, like it
Right.
probably would sound killer. I don't
Right.
know. Um anyway, that was kind of a tangent, but
No, I love that. I think that is a great way to be, as I was saying, what I was not being, which is more generous to it, that it's sort of the lost Wilbury album in a way. I mean, I think for those guys, 88 to 93, it was just tough for those guys, like in terms of who am I, what is happening in the music world, everything I've done at this point. I'm talking about like
yeah.
Bob Dylan, Neil Young, George Harrison, and of course Paul Simon. Of course, there are like amazing gems in that period of time from them, but I think like identity wise, they're all kind of struggling. With the exception of maybe
Yeah,
Petty, because he's more new then, and
sure.
Springsteen then, like who's a little younger. So I guess in that way, it's okay to give this a little more grace and like,
Yeah. But also like, I don't know, I'm listening to this song in the car on the way to school today, and my kid, his teacher this year is like crazy about the Beatles. He has Beatles stuff all over the room.
mhm,
So my kid's like more interested in the Beatles, and of course I played the Beatles for him, but he's asking me about it, and so then we're listening to this, and this guitar comes in. I'm like, hey, that's one of the Beatles. That's George. And like, if I told you we found a Bob Dylan song from 1990 that George Harrison plays a slide guitar solo on, or two. It's not the greatest Bob Dylan song, but do you want that to exist? You're like,
yeah,
hell yeah. You know what I mean? You would pay any amount of money for that to exist right now. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
so like, I mean, what are we complaining about here?
No, totally. And like when I was just doing my Bob Dylan onboarding, yeah, and I was just getting everything all at the same time. I've talked about this before. Uh, Under the Red Sky, I had like the Columbia House,
Yeah.
music, and that's how I got all the Bob Dylan albums. Like, great, I can buy one Bob Dylan album for full price and like 10 for a penny,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And Under the Red Sky was just one of them. And kind of like what you said about taking it all in and not thinking one period was worse than the other. That's a lot of how I experienced Bob Dylan. Like wasn't alive when the Christian period happened, so I wasn't angry about it at the
Right.
time, and or things like that, or that I wasn't mad that he went electric, whatever. So
Right.
this is just another Bob Dylan album,
Yeah.
and that comes among all the Bob Dylan albums.
If I'm going to continue to stretch even farther,
Stretch it.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And perhaps you could speak to this a little bit, but
Mm.
there's a few biblical references to the red sky. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, does that kind of sneak in at all? There's one I looked up, Matthew. Now I haven't read the quote unquote New Testament in quite some time. Although
Yeah.
I did go to Episcopalian high school and
Did
we
you
read
really?
we read it front to back, so
Yeah.
I'm quite familiar. But
Uh,
I'll just if I may turn your Bibles to Matthew 16:2-3. Jesus says, when evening comes, you say it'll be fair weather, for the sky is red, and in the morning today it will be stormy, for the sky is red and overcast. You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times. And that's kind of a like this. There's this ancient thing: a red sky at night, sailor's delight; red sky in morning, sailor's warning. So there's
mm.
something. I looked
Mm.
this up and I couldn't understand it. Maybe perhaps because I'm not a sailor. But
It's
there's
like a
something about
nautical thing.
it's a
Like,
nautical thing. And it's
yeah.
also like something about like if there is something that is scientific about it in the sense that like the amount of moisture in the air in the morning determines like how red the sun looks when it first comes up, and that can affect the winds or something. I don't know, but there is this old thing that goes back apparently to the time, of at least of the Christian Bible. And it's an image that does apparently appear in some old folk songs. And I couldn't really track them down, but I'm sure, of course, Bob knows them. It's again that takes it out of the realm of like it's just kind of a rhyming dictionary or like an image that just
Hmm.
whatever red sky. We're just combining things, but into this thing that like he, uh, clearly read, the Hebrew and Christian Bibles back and forth and got it all into his head, and
Right.
that stuff continues to come out.
Right.
So you can't discount there being an allusion getting its way in there. There's a little bit of that in a piece from Joel, but it's a little bit it's not quite as direct. The
Which
book of Joel, not
which
some
part?
dude
Which,
named Joel.
yeah. No. Yeah.
Joel.
Yeah. The
um, well, it's
Yoel.
like yeah,
Yeah.
Yoel, exactly, our boy Yoel.
Let's hear it.
Well, it's sort of not quite on point, but it basically says like I will show wonders in the heavens and on earth, blood and fire and billows of smoke. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before
Mm.
the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. So this is like your old classic,
The prophets were pissed. Yeah.
yeah, apocalyptic prophet thing.
Yeah.
We know that stuff's always appealing.
Yeah.
Not least.
Repent or else. Yep. Yeah.
Exactly. So the moon turning red, we've got the moon in this song. Again, that's a little bit more of a stretch to say that
Okay.
it's making a reference to that. But
I'll allow
again,
it, since we had the
well,
New Testament, we had to get some Torah in there, so I'll
yeah,
allow
well, Tanakh,
it.
perhaps. That so the point is like these kinds of images do go back quite a long way, and I'm
Yeah.
sure in other, I just know that Bob is familiar with the Hebrew and Christian Bible, perhaps with other ancient philosophy and texts as well that reference it. I'm sure this is like it doesn't seem like it's that much of a stretch. Like sometimes the sky is red,
Mhm.
or very dark colors,
Literally, when he
whatever.
played it at the gorge, behind him it was red.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So yeah, so it's not like, whatever. I don't know. It's not that much of a stretch, but it is something that is an image that has people seem to see it as some sort of omen of being worthy of note. Whatever, it
yeah.
has some meaning to people through the ages, and so he's reaching for that in a
Yeah.
way. And it's again, it takes it out of the oh, I mean, it's not like really a rhyme, but you don't understand. It takes it out of like just an easy, simple word to say to a kid to something that has resonance down through the ages, and maybe that's in there, maybe that's not. I don't know. That's part of the
Right.
fun, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, the imagery is important because he is painting a picture here with image. We're seeing, and he's talking about the wind blowing low, and maybe that's another Easter egg, David. To the
Yeah,
the wind blowing,
sure.
and like key to the kingdom, blind horse. These all seem like very
Yes,
biblical-esque words,
right.
and I think that that imagery, is definitely tied, since it's the title track, to the photo on the cover of the CD. So
Hmm.
I found in on the blog Untold Dylan, Atwood writes about it, and he says maybe the front and the back photograph was from Hibbing, but no, The website searchingforagem.com, however, says it was thought that the front photograph was taken in Israel, but it was actually in the Mojave Desert in California. The like how amazing is that, right? The rear photograph shows Bob on the front porch somewhere in the USA with a US flag, one of the flower urns. Both photographs are copyrighted by Bob himself, but credited to camouflage photo, which doesn't actually exist. So, I
Okay.
mean, bravo to that one
Okay.
at Untold
Yeah.
Dylan. But
Produced by Jack Frost.
yeah, exactly. But I love that, that we're looking at it and it's like, we're talking about these biblical references and the imagery, and it's like, oh, well, maybe it's Israel. No, it's the Mojave Desert.
This sounds like a text my mom would send me. Like, I heard this Bob Dylan shot an album cover in Israel. Like, all
It's
right, mom, we'll see.
right.
It's actually 2 hours from his house.
Right. He went on a little road trip. So
Yeah. Like, you leave Malibu, go to the Mojave, come back and be there for lunch,
yeah. But he does say, let the bird sing, let the bird fly. One day the man in the moon went home and the river went dry. So there is that moon imagery, like you were saying, from the book of Joel, which I wouldn't put it past Bob to get it cut as deep as that
Right.
to be
And
to
and
reference.
you may be more qualified to speak on that side of it than me, but having
Well, even as a former Jewish educator who taught a lot
right.
of prophets, a lot of Nach, I don't know if I ever went as deep as Joel, but as
Well,
say for you all, but
that can be your portion this week or
there
whatever.
you go. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I that's about as deep as I go. I'm not
okay,
gonna. I mean, obviously the like baked in a pie is like that's a classic folk song, nursery rhyme thing. I don't know why that is a big. I guess there was a thing of I mean, I guess people were concerned about being baked in pies. That was a common concern for
yeah.
quite
It's a
some time,
very
all the way.
like Mother Goose type story type
Right.
thing,
Yeah,
like
all the way
Hansel and
through.
Gretel or something. Yeah,
Right up to Sweeney Todd. Maybe it could
yeah.
be that Sweeney Todd was popular in the '80s, and he went and saw it, and he's like, all right, I'm gonna do that pie thing. Heard enough of this pie. I'm doing the pie bit myself.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Look, it's a sketchy one in the sense that it's not like it's not even like Lily and Rosemary and the Jack of Hearts where you can kind of follow the characters along. You know what I mean? You don't get a lot about the boy and the girl.
Right.
You know what I mean? They lived in an alley. They got baked in a pie. A little bit of this happens, a little bit of that happens. You can kind of draw your own conclusions. The man in the moon, you're not really sure. Was he responsible? Is he being accused of this pie related crime and the river running dry? Or did he leave because he saw the pie thing happening and he saw the river running dry? Like, I'm out of here. This moon situation is not working for me. I don't know, but it doesn't, that stuff doesn't just command a lot of attention. It just kind of goes by.
I mean,
But again, it's
I
just like
love Froggy
vibes.
Went a Courting, so why can't I love Under the Red
Froggy Went
Sky?
a Courting. That I mean, come on, Froggy Went a
You
Courting is a killer.
you
I
could
love Froggy
sing
Went a Courting.
this to the tune of Froggy Went a Courting.
Probably, yeah, yeah. I used to sing Froggy Went a Courting to my kid when he was really little, so I should bust that one back out again. Yeah, little kids love that one. Yeah, it has that kind of element, and you can see that then he just like whatever after this album, bricks, just goes like, well, why don't I just like do the original folk songs anyway rather than
Right,
trying to write my own,
right.
and that worked out great. So good, great, we got that out of it,
Yeah,
and
everything after this really is like my favorite Bob Dylan.
right, well, yeah, okay, I mean, sure, Christmas in the Heart, the whole thing. You're
Maybe not
taking it
Christmas
all
in
in.
the Heart, but maybe not Christmas in the Heart,
I mean,
and maybe not
I
all
love
of the
everything.
Sinatra stuff, but
I mean, I love that stuff. That's
yeah,
that's like right up my alley. But I hear what you're saying. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's he makes a turn, and you could argue, does that turn happen at Love and Theft? Does it happen at Time Out of Mind? Does it
Mhm.
happen with the with as the evolution of the Never tour, with the Good as I've Been to You and World Go Wrong? I don't know. Then you just keep going back, and you're like, all right, this one's good. And then before that, you get Old Mercy, so it's not like he was, struggling.
Right, right,
There's
right.
just like there's gems all scattered through the catalog. Yeah, and I mean, as a live song, it really works. I mean, it's like
It's
there's
great.
something
Yeah.
to come on. This dude is out here spitting songs with a lot of words. A lot of his career, guys. You know what I mean? He's throwing a lot of bars out there,
He
and
finally
so
has a lyric book up there to help him. I'm so
yeah,
happy for
and
him.
yeah, exactly. Just come on, man. And so I totally get why, even at the time, like, early 90s, whatever, especially when he was doing so many different songs and, doing a lot of his more wordy material. If he's doing Joker Man, there's a lot of words in these songs. And then like to have this one where he's like, this one, I really don't have to tax the old noodle on this one.
Yes.
You know what I mean? They're, baked in a pie. No problem. I got
And
this.
and 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 his Bob Dylan brain can easily substitute a different rhyme if he doesn't have the exact, whether
Right.
he's doing it on
Yeah,
purpose or
exactly. Exactly. So, this one's like maybe like a little bit of a breather, but like it's a simple instrumental piece, but like it just kind of works.
Yeah.
And it's a simple melody. It's not that most of his stuff like is that challenging melodically or instrumentally, but even for him, this is pretty simple. But it just kind of works. Like I've not, I mean, you can hear live versions where his voice sounds lousy or the recording is bad or whatever. But like certainly have not listened to all 170 of them, but I never hear it and think it sucks. It's
Right.
just a vibe,
Right.
and that's
Right.
cool too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything doesn't have to be whatever, I don't know, like a profound statement.
Right. Absolutely. All right, David. So before I let you go and before you tell me a little bit about Rock Docs, I have an exit question for you.
Yeah.
And I don't know if when you were on Pod Dylan, Rob was doing those yet, but
Yeah, I
um,
think so.
okay. So
But even if you
this,
ask me the same question, I will not remember what I said. So
I don't remember what he said to you on that one. And so if it is, it's amazing coincidence. But here's your exit question. If you could see a documentary about any Bob Dylan song, what would it be? Who would direct it and why?
wow. That's a good one. That's a really good
Thanks.
question. Okay.
Thank you.
Wow, you're good at podcasting, man. Jeez. Okay. Okay. I will say, oh man. I mean, you could do it's just a lot to think about. I mean, I guess I mean I always love Joker Man, so maybe a documentary about that. Like I would want
Hmm.
something that has a lot to chew on. I'm
Hmm.
not sure that if I had to choose, I would choose Under the Red Sky. Whatever. Like a 8 hour long get back version,
Oh, babe, I'm under
interrogation
that.
of a handy dandy, I don't
Yeah.
know. But no, I mean Jokerman's always been fascinating, so you could just pick that one.
Let's go with
And
Joker Man. Yeah, who would direct
um
it?
who would direct it? Is this like living or dead?
Sure.
Okay.
It's your
I'll
question.
do, I don't know. I'll do Andrei Tarkovsky.
Okay, and why?
Well, first of all, he only made like 6 movies, then he died. So like, it'd be nice to have another one. He made Andrei Rublev.
Mhm.
So he, was quite well versed in this sort of apocalyptic biblical literature, and most of his movies have that sort of creepy, weird sense of like
Mm.
doom, and like
So not
Solaris.
necessarily a documentary director.
No, I don't know that
Yeah.
he ever directed. He
Yeah.
might have, but I
Yeah.
don't. He may have, but
Yeah.
I don't know that he directed. I've never seen it.
Interesting.
So, oh no, I don't. Yeah, no. I mean, it could be somebody who just does documentaries, but I'd rather just. I kind of like it when somebody who's just an artist in another field comes in and does a documentary because it's
Hmm.
just such a different perspective.
Hmm.
Yeah, he may have died before that song even came out, or right around that. I'm not 100% sure on the sequence of events. I wasn't prepared for this question, but yeah, I don't know. I'm just gonna go ahead and say,
Let's do it. That's great. Get it on.
probably that's probably not an answer. If somebody else gives the exact same answer, coincidentally, like introduce me to that person because we probably would really get along. Okay,
Amazing.
there you go.
Well,
Do with
David,
that what you will.
I'm gonna lock it up tight. So, David, can you tell us about a little bit about Rock Docs and where folks can find you and if they want to talk about Bob Dylan with you or
Yeah,
all the David
well,
things?
yes. We are at Rock Docs Pod on Twitter and Instagram and stuff. Yeah, I mean it's a documentary. It's a podcast about music documentaries. It's me and my friend Andy, and we're coming up on about 100 episodes, give or take. And in most of our episodes, we just discuss a documentary, sometimes with a guest, sometimes by ourselves. We try to cover as many different eras and genres and all kinds of things. But for Bob Dylan fans, we've certainly hit most of the big Dylan ones or Dylan related ones, from The Last Waltz to The Rolling Thunder to
Don't Look Back with
Glenn.
Ray Padgett, my favorite episode.
Don't look. Thank you. Don't look back, of course, with Ray Padgett. Where there's some more coming up to be
Ooh.
to be disclosed,
Oh,
and then
okay.
of course Bob pops up as a character. You got the We Are the World one.
Yes.
He shows up from time to time in other related documentaries. So
Did you
there's
guys
plenty of
just drop everything when We Are the World came out? Like, did you have something else planned? You're like, we have to cover this right now.
no, yeah, that one was like really kind of big.
Yeah.
So we did kind of scramble the jets to get that one in.
Yeah.
Although, like, sometimes we talk about a documentary years later, so like,
Right.
we're not like bound to a timetable. But yeah, I mean, we've done documentaries from the '60s to like ones that came out whatever a month ago.
Mm.
So if you're interested in music documentaries, you can check that out. Or if you have a suggestion, like, hey, you idiots haven't talked about this one, why not? You suck. You can
Okay.
tell us that on Twitter.
Well, if you ever want to talk about Miss Americana, Taylor Swift, I'd be happy to throw in my hat into the ring.
Yeah, we may have one coming out about that, but
Oh,
it's not
okay.
locked down. So if that one doesn't, if that doesn't come through, I will definitely let you know. I
Yeah.
do love that documentary.
Yeah.
It's very good and certainly relevant at the current moment.
Yes.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, no,
Great.
I like that talk. That's a good one.
Great. Well, thank you so much, David. This was amazing.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Henry. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for listening. Please look for the next episode on the 15th day of the month, found in all of your podcast feeds. Give us a follow on Twitter at Songs of Bob. If you're subscribing on Apple Podcasts, please take a moment to give us a rating and review. If you'd like to see a video version of this podcast, please visit and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@songsofbobdylan. You can email us at songsofbobdylan@gmail.com. Thank you to my friend and mentor, Rob Kelly, for designing our fabulous logo, and to my mandolin teacher, Mark Mitchell, from the Old Town School of Folk Music in Chicago, for teaching me how to play the intro and the outro. Lastly, if you want to support the cost of hosting my podcasts, go to patreon.com/gonzo3249 for $5. I'll show my gratitude by giving you a shout out on the show of your choice. So big thank you to Roberta Rakove, Matt Simonson, and Christopher Vani. Truly, thank you so much. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.